joining us on Recruiter Prep, Jen, to share your story in recruitment. Can you just tell us a little bit about your career overview up to this point?
As far as my journey, it definitely wasn't the easiest one or a normal one. I actually came from not even knowing that recruiting was a industry that you could get into. And unbeknownst to me, I was actually recruiting at one point and didn't recognize it until I sat down and really thought about our conversation today. I started in the golf industry. I played Division I golf. I went pro after. I recruited an entire women's team to a college that did not have a women's team. And that was my first episode of really difficult recruiting, is getting women to play golf that didn't know how. So I eventually moved my way down to Florida, took a job out of the golf industry. I didn't want to be in the industry anymore. Got into sales. And then I was actually recruited out of my sales job into a recruiting firm. And there I learned the crazy world of tech recruiting. I'm now accounting and finance explicitly and only at this point. Hit a few bumps in the road, got into some outsourced companies that had more, outsourcing big packages of people as consultants. But now over the last 6.5, 7 years, I've been exclusively accounting and finance, perm, full desk, running the gamut of recruiting, and now been with two firms. I've been with my firm now almost 2 years, changed after a couple of years of working with a really great firm where I learned a lot. And here we are today.
Awesome. So how did you get prospected? You mentioned you were doing something else and you were sold and brought into the business. How did that all happen? And what attracted you to make that switch at that time?
So really kind of interesting. I was picked up off, I was working at a very famous, well-known car rental company at the airport. My father owns a marketing and advertising firm. And he said, hey, if you want to get into sales, Avis actually has a very good sales program. They teach you top-down selling, all this stuff. I'm like, all right, fine. And at that moment, I thought, oh, cool, an extra $800 a month in commissions. This is amazing. I was 24. I didn't know any better. But I was actually recruited by the owner of the recruiting company off the desk when I was selling him a car. And he was like, you're too good to do this. Come be a recruiter. I was like, I don't know what that means, but what's the money? And at the time when he shared what the money could have been, all I saw were dollar signs. And I said, let's go do it. And that was how that came into be. And I started in tech, and bless their hearts, tech recruiters. I couldn't do it. I think it's a very difficult, I think they're all difficult, but tech recruiting is one that's just not for my brain. It doesn't work.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I would probably,
and you're like, yeah. What is peanut butter pie? I don't know what any of these coding languages are. And yeah, just kind of worked my way through the different industries. And I had joked at one point that when I got hired into my previous firm as accounting and finance, I said, I should probably go tech, because I did that for 8 months, 6 years ago. And the recruiter of recruiters talked to me and she goes, no, you don't want to do this. Trust me, go A&F. It'll be fine. And I said, well, I don't even know how to balance my own checkbook, because that used to be a thing at one time. We had checkbooks. I was like, I don't even know how to do that. They don't want me dealing with finance people. And they're like, you'll be fine. So I'm really glad that I listened to my recruiter of recruiters.
That's awesome.
Shameless plug.
Awesome. No, I love that, because you just kind of showed your perseverance, first of all, from falling into the industry so randomly and just continuing with it. Because I would imagine, to your point, that first experience may not have been as great as where you are today, right? Both financially, career-wise. So at the time, what kind of, other than the dollar signs, what made you persevere in this line of work? Because so many people would have just given up, right? They would have been like, after the first bad recruiting experience or joining maybe the first firm wasn't their favorite, they would have just bounced. For you, what do you think really gave you that confidence and perseverance to continue and being like, wait, I actually see a really big opportunity here?
Yeah. The first recruiting job, I was talking about the tech role. I was only in it for about 8 months, and I got poached by a client who was like, hey, like your style, do you want to come work for us? We're building out a BD, a business development group for our cybersecurity company. So I went in-house and did the BD side. I was only on recruiting side. So once I saw the BD side, and then I also remembered the recruiting part that I did like, I was like, wait a second. I really enjoy people, and I just got a job because someone liked me. So inorganically, it kind of just worked out that I capitalized on the fact that I was good at building relationships and I was a people person. And there's not many jobs that you can get where you get paid to be a people person or good with people, good learning people and all that stuff. So it was more the fascination that I could deal with people. I always joke that they're the best and worst part of our job. And and I think anyone who's done this for 5 minutes will agree. And I think it was mainly the idea that I could look back at school and laugh at all my report cards that said talks too much in class, socializes too much. And I'm like, guess who gets paid to do this now? But no, it was just more fun dealing with people than dealing with a product, where I just felt like I could develop my own competitive advantage with people and selling a person or selling a client to a person. And I hate the word sell, I use it a lot, but marketing them somewhere and really making them excited about something. It's harder to do that with a product where there's 20 other products that do the same thing and you're just beating people on margins most of the time. So
100%. Yeah. I think you just answered a question I had in my head, was like, why did you leave product sales to go back into recruiting? And obviously that is the reason. And I 100% agree with you here that this industry is very unique because you're not selling an inanimate like thing or service or platform or SaaS product. You have your own little monopoly by way of relationships. It's all very weird to truly conceptualize, but once you're in recruiting, you either going to love that dynamic, or I think some people are just like, I don't really care to know too much about this person's life. Yeah. Whereas I think you and I can agree, we're extra interested. We're like, ooh, what happened there? Like, whoa, tell me more about that. Like, that's so natural, that genuine curiosity, that if you don't like the candidate drama or what they have going on in their life, that's going to impact their career decisions, then yeah, I don't blame you for being like, that's too intimate of a product. I'd rather go into like an actual product, inanimate kind of, this person doesn't have anything going on, right?
And some people should do that because there's a lot of people that you can sense they just don't have that like the gravitas, like the oomph factor, where I've dealt with some rec to recs, I've dealt with recruiters, and I'm just like, you're one of us, like get a little excited to be doing this. But and of course you definitely have to be in this for the right reason. You have to, exactly what we're talking about, your product is people. You have to always remember, this is a person, this is their career, this is their kids' food on the table, this is them paying off their student loans, this is someone maybe finally paying off their wedding. There's so many emotional pieces that are tied to this industry that you will never find in another industry. And it's not for everyone because of that. I truly believe. Right.
It's just, you either love it or you don't like that. Right. So that's what I hope that's why I'm so happy and excited about featuring folks like yourself, just to kind of spread that message on Recruiter Prep, because I think so many people think something is a certain way, but then they get into it and it's like, surprise, right? So like, we just want to be upfront, like, this is kind of what you're going to like, and it's also what you're not going to like. So you really have to think about it. So for you, when you made that switch into recruiting, I mean, you went from, and by the way, car rentals is an amazing pre-recruiting track. Like, that is actually what a lot of top billers, they come out of car rentals.
It's don't look how many of us started with like, I can't even tell you how many people, enterprise budget, managers, those types of functions. Absolutely. And it teaches you how to deal with candidates, people at their angriest, people in their, it teaches you to have to strike up little, you have to, shoot the breeze with people. You have to learn how to small talk. You've got to, you know what? It was great. I don't regret it in the slightest bit. And if, at the very least, I now very much know how to rent a car. So if anyone ever needs any, I get everyone that always asks me questions like, do I need that insurance? I'm like, well, it depends on your credit card and your current insurance. But so I do still have residual intelligence from that job. Not much, but a little bit.
Yeah. And when you were making that switch in your first 6 months of really learning recruiting, what did you think of it? What was it like for you in the earlier stages of your recruiting career?
It was awesome. It happened to be, and this is something that's really cool and I think very indicative of our career. It's where you'll probably meet some of your best friends. You will end up finding your people, I swear, in recruiting. That first recruiting job I talked about, I was only in it for 8 months. My boss was just my officiant at my wedding 12 years later.
Wow.
One of my best friends, like my big brother. But honestly, that the people saved me in that role because it was so hard. It was so hard to learn. It was so hard to come out of your shell because you don't know. And if you're anything like me, I'm a perfectionist. I'm a control freak. I want to know everything about something before I go and try and tell anybody else about it. But kind of circling back to just the bare basics of what I thought of the role when I first got in it, drinking from a fire hose, 100% drinking from a fire hose. However, constantly listening to people around me was easily one of the biggest influences, good and bad. Trying to understand, recruiting in general, trying to understand the lingo, especially of tech recruiting, the nature of how to run your desk, learning how to recruit. What does this mean to recruit? Okay, I have this job description and I have all these people in front of me on LinkedIn or resumes. What do I do now? You have to learn what questions to ask, how to review a resume, and all of a sudden kind of train your eyes to know what you're looking for. So it was a lot of learning. It was a lot of trial and error. And I think that that's the biggest challenge for people that get into this industry. We're all control freaks. We're all type A, mostly, a lot of us. And we want to be perfect. We want to be good every time. But in the beginning, eat your humble pie and just let it happen. And but be open, listen, and don't combat people that are smarter than you or been in the industry longer. They've seen it all. They've been there. You can do things a different way, but their way isn't wrong. It just might not be right for you. And that was the hardest thing for me, was finding my way. And, learning the general idea of recruiting. How often do I follow up? What questions do I ask? Just everything. And again, drinking from a fire hose and learning from everybody around me. Training's great, but I think hearing people and learning from the conversations around you is the best thing that taught me anything, for the most part.
Absolutely. And I don't know were you prepared for this, or was any of this a surprise when you got into the industry? Like, was there anything that stood out to you that you were like, wow, this was something new that I wasn't really prepared for or expected as a career in recruiting? Or was it more like, you know what, I knew some version of this was going to happen? Was there anything that really stood out to you that was like, wow, this is like kind of mind blowing about this career when you started really getting into it?
So about the process and the career, I'll talk 1 and 2. About the process in general, I think I was really surprised how open people actually were to talking to me. I think that was one of my paralysis by analysis type thing. Like, oh, I have to be perfect before I make a phone call. There's a reason they call it smiling and dialing when you first get into a staffing firm. Just pick it up. You'll figure it out. You will. But the surprising part was how many people actually wanted to hear from you. I was paralyzed at first because I was like, well, how do I know if they want a job? Well, make sure your job is awesome and that you portray it as awesome, and they'll probably want to talk to you.
Be very great. And I think that's why a lot of people did gravitate towards you, right? Maybe to your surprise, but actually because you have such an attracting personality, that's probably a big part of it. Maybe you even surprised yourself a little bit with how, because candidates recognize that. To your point, like they see, whoa, this person's really interested and I'm going to engage, right? And that probably was surprising because you probably came in like, hey, I don't have that much experience. They might judge me on like how many months I've been, but they actually were like, whoa, this lady gets it. Like, I want to talk to her.
And that was it. I was sharing with people. I was okay with telling people, and I still do this to this day. I took on a role recently for a friend of our firm's, and it was a role I really don't have experience in. But even from the get-go, I learned that when you tell certain people, hey, I am not an expert in finance, in FP&A, what you do, but now what I say is I'm an expert in finding you. I know enough to be dangerous. Can you explain something to me? And the majority of professionals that we're recruiting, they love to talk about themselves. You don't realize that. That's one of the biggest things that I realized, that humans love talking about themselves. You just have to ask the right questions. And that was, the lead up. You learn the right questions. You learn the things that will open dialogue. When you first start recruiting, all you get are yes and no answers because you're asking closed-ended questions. And it's that whole learning process. It's picking up little things from other people. But yeah, I was just surprised at how many people actually didn't think I was bothering them. And there's a lot of people that get into our industry and they're like, oh, I don't want to bug them. I found out a month ago, a colleague of mine had never made a cold call into a company to call a candidate at their desk. And I'm like, how have you been a $700,000 biller and never made cold calls into people's companies? She's like, oh, I just always thought that was rude. I'm like, I would have billed like $1 billion less if I didn't do that. So it's, those were the surprising processes or the surprising things that did eventually start. But I think that more surprisingly, just in general about the role was truly how much of a career it can be. When I sat back and thought about how long I've been in recruiting in some fashion, whether it was fully on just the BD side, full desk, or just a recruiter for those 8 months, I've been recruiting now since I was 20, for almost like 13 years technically, or in the industry of some sort. But the big surprise was this is truly a career. This is a legitimate, very lucrative career that if you strike it the right way, you're going to end up in a company where you have flexibility. You've got a lot of money to be made. It's great. I mean, it's weird to think I'm an adult enough to think that I have a career, because I don't feel like an adult yet. But yeah, that would probably be one of the biggest surprises.
I love that. I love that. And definitely this is a great segue into the financial end of it. So I guess from what you've seen, what are some average, pretty solid years, and what are some amazing years for you? And yeah, let's learn a little bit more about the financial reward side.
Absolutely. And I think an important caveat to this is in my previous company, I had unlimited PTO. A lot of companies have unlimited PTO. I took full advantage of that. In 1 year, I went to 8 countries and I still worked. The joke was I was still closing deals at 2 a.m. I closed a CFO deal at 2 a.m. at a bar in Copenhagen. Another beautiful part about our job, you can literally do it anywhere. But as far as earnings, this was so funny, sitting down and analyzing my earnings over the years. I took out, I have to do my taxes soon. Don't tell my husband, I still haven't done mine. Looking at all my W-2s, that was really humbling. And I told you that earlier, where it was so wild to sit down and realize that I stayed in this career after only making $47,000 my first year. And that includes my first year in executive search. That's humbling because I just took home 320 this year and I'm on pace to do more than that this coming year. But my average take home has been around the 2s, anywhere from like 175 to 30-ish area once I got up and running. I think the coolest thing for newer recruiters to think about, my earnings that first year went from 47,000 to 174 the next year. I mean, imagine making I'm bad at math, $130,000 more or something, however, I don't get paid to do math. I get paid to talk to people. So a lot more money the year after. That's also terrifying as a recruiter, because you're like, oh my gosh, I'm never going to make this money again. And then all of a sudden you double that. And then you're making 200, then you're making 300. It's really awesome. It is. And my billings, billings are different for each company. Last year I did 885. But the humbling thing, and these are the things I want to share with people, I did 885 with 115,000 of fall offs. So I would have been at I hate even thinking about it because it makes me so mad.
No, I hear that.
But
I hear that.
You got to take the good with the bad. And it's important for me to say, hey, 6 years ago, I made 50K. And just last year, I lost 115. I lost more last year than I made my first year, which is crazy to think about. So that's good to know as people look at this industry, but it's way more fun now.
And that just proves how important, like, picking a career that suits you, that is for you, and then finding your way within that career and then developing yourself. But to your point, has that humility, because I do think, and speaking of that, what do you think are important qualities that people need to kind of introspect on if they're truly serious about evaluating this career? Like, who's it for? Who's it not for? Because obviously for you, you really had that foresight and self-awareness to know that you were going to make it. You just had to find the right situation, the right market, and took a few iterations, but you got there. Now you have so much ahead of you in a very stable career that will carry through for the next decade, 2 decades, as long as you want to work, really.
I was gonna say, you work 2 more decades. I turned 38 last week, and I'm on my pace is 45. We are aggressively trying to retire at 45.
And that's insane, because so many people, they don't even, that's not possible in their careers, right? Where for you, it's like, maybe you even beat that. Maybe you want to, it's just like, it's a choice at that point, because you are on a sales business. So I guess for you, like, having gone through it, obviously having trained people, seen people, mentored people through your career, what people should go into it, who should avoid it, what's up with that?
So I think and you would probably agree, it's so wrong for people to be like, this is the exact profile we need. They're not all going to look the same. Not everyone is going to look the same.
100%.
They're not going to have the same backgrounds, but I would think, and you probably know this more than me, a big biller, good producer, whatever you want to call it, or a successful recruiter, they typically all have a couple of the same traits. And the same traits are not, this boisterous personality. That's not it right. Helps, but it can also be hindering. Yeah. I have to be very aware that I'm intense. You and I are very similar. We have to be very conscious of who we're talking to and how intense we're being. Because some people are like, not interested. You're crazy. So this was my favorite question, because this is important to me. And I have said this, like, just the people that aren't in it for the right reasons just should find a different career, because our career is so hard. And I feel like it's always the bad boyfriend syndrome in our career. We're always trying to make up a lot of times for the last recruiter someone dealt with that ruined everything for them. And I have no problem mending fences and showing someone why I'm different. And I make mistakes too, but it's, if you're just not inherently in love with all the good and the bad, you just shouldn't be in the industry. But I think that if I had to kind of build a profile, I think the best people suited for recruiting are the ones that are extremely motivated in general. They have strong emotional intelligence, meaning they just kind of get it. They understand how things work. They just get it. Look up emotional intelligence. It's one of my favorite topics to address. But ethical, really good at multitasking. I will say, for my fellow ADHD people, this is probably a really awesome career for you to have. You just got to get it on lock. And if you have 40, browser tabs open like me, you're probably a decent recruiter, or out of your mind, one of the two. But, and on top of just, again, the being ethical, that's just huge. Just don't, you'll get found out in a heartbeat. It'll bite you, whether it's now or later, it's going to happen. And so ethical, capable of building genuine relationships. People will sniff you out if you're fake. They should be able. I mean, it's just be genuine, build that real relationship, let someone get to know you and actually be interested when you're building the relationship with them in getting to know what makes them tick. And then I would just say someone who's just really thorough and understands that there's a lot of mental checklists that you go through every day with this, and even physical ones. I've been doing this for I don't know how long, and I still have a checklist of things that I make sure that I do with every profile I take in and interview, all those things. And then competitive. You got to be competitive, or don't be an agency. Go and not a slight at internal. I have some friends that are making some really good money internal, and they really love their choice to go internal. But that competitive nature is absolutely needed for agency. If you want to just do this because you love people and I don't really need the job. No, find out why you need the job and do it. And then I would say that the people that really probably wouldn't be best suited for this, super sensitive. I'm very sensitive. I have a lot. I told you the other day, I'm like, I'm leaving this career. I'm done forever. But not sensitive to a point that I can't just turn it around the next day. That's what you have to be able to do, is pick yourself up by your bootstraps and dust yourself off. But overly sensitive, anyone who gets defeated easily. And I would say that lacking that motivation, or just having the unwillingness to put the work in, it's going to be a miserable time for you. And the one thing that I've started thinking of while I talk to candidates in general, and this I kind of added this last minute in my thoughts for who wouldn't be good for our career. Anyone that's just afraid or not confident enough to bet on themselves, where you have to be confident that you can get this done, you can learn this, you can do whatever you want with this career, because no one's going to believe in you if they know that you don't believe in yourself. That's for sure. So that was a roundabout way of answering that, but I think that's how I feel about the profiles that should and should not, I guess.
Yeah. High degree of a personal self-belief, like I can do it. And
a lot of self-awareness. Self-awareness is super important too, because again, there's going to be times where you say something in the heat of the moment or something. And I just did this the other day, and I had the self-awareness to call my client back and say, hey, I want to make sure this came off the right way. Because, interpretation is in the eyes of the person that heard it, or the eyes or the ears of the person that, took it in.
Right. Yep. To your point, the sensitivity to people's emotions and emotional intelligence versus the like there's good sensitivity and there's bad sensitivity. And I think in this job, if you get bothered by people's behaviors, and we all do, that's definitely part of the job, but sensitive as in like you take it to heart, or you think it's personal, or you can't just be like, because sometimes you'll hit up a really good candidate and they just had a bad day and they'll be like, F off. And then you're going to be like, oh my God. But then you have to be able to say, I'm going to message them 2 months from now. And then you're going to do it. And then they're going to be like, oh, hey, what's up? And then you just realize that's the kind of, and I think that is more resilience. That's the word that I think is when you said that, I was like, resilience, having the resiliency, because I do think good recruiters are very sensitive. Like we know, like, ooh, what did they just say? What did we do wrong? What is everything okay? Like,
we all, and this is what my husband thinks is so funny about me. He's like, you are so type A, you don't care about this. You are, you've got your eye on the prize. You've got everything going on, but I don't like that people don't like me sometimes. I hate it. There's so many of us that you would think that it just watered down our back. I had exactly what you just said. I talked to a candidate. I reached out to him. I had the most amazing message. My LinkedIn response rate's like 52%. My messaging is good. I love my messaging. This guy destroyed me. His response was, what's the company? What's the money? And like, that is the worst. We hate that. And I was like, breathe. And I said, it sounds like you've worked with some bad recruiters in the past. Let's hop on the phone and let me show you why I'm not one of these ding dongs calling you about a staff accountant job when you're clearly a CFO or whatever it was. And it took my pride not to respond to him with, well, your personality isn't going to fit for my client, even though in my brain I want it to. But I gave him the benefit of the doubt, and we talked on the phone, and he was still terrible. So sometimes it just happens. But I gave myself the opportunity to talk to him and confirm.
Well, that's an amazing success story, because you were able to convert a pretty terrible, and that could have gone the other way. That could have been a totally amazing placeable candidate. It just so happened that this guy is really like, actually, that was exactly who he was. But a lot of times it is exactly to your point, a candidate being like, hey, I did have some bad experiences. You're awesome. Here's my candidacy. Make money off of me. But that guy just happened to actually be who he said he was.
And he reached out to me. He reached out to me 3 days later after I had told him. I was like, this role is just not going to be the right fit. And it's really not, because my client is super, super, super sensitive about big egos, and they just don't want them in their company. And that's another thing. We're the gatekeepers to a lot of these jobs. And he ended up actually texting me 3 days after. I was like, hey, I just wanted to let you know I really enjoyed our conversation. And just because that role wasn't going to work out, I'd love to stay on your radar for the future. And I was like, all right, that's how it works with our world.
It's like, okay, let me see how desperate I get. And like, if I ever want to dive back into you, I'll see. I'll let you know.
And that's another thing as a recruiter, be able to say no. Learn to say no. That is the best thing a recruiter can do, is to learn when to turn someone away or let them go, or just they're not a right fit. Don't get desperate.
That is I think that is another really great trait, the ability to say no and to defend yourself and to communicate no's. Because so many people are like, I don't want to tell them no, but you literally have to say, hey, this is not a fit. These are the reasons why. Goodbye. Right? Like, that is part of our job. Like 9 times out of 10, it's going to be a no.
Nine
right?
times. I mean, if it was the other way around, I would be retired now. One.
We'd all be bajillionaires, right?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, no,
And that's another thing
yeah.
I always joke and say, 50% of our job is fun. 50% of it's getting kicked in the shins. And you just have to put your shin guards on and be ready for tomorrow, because it's going to happen again. But eventually you'll be able to look at your paychecks and you'll be buying cool things, and you'll buy that car you wanted, or the properties. You and I are the property people. Buy properties that'll help you retire when you're 45. Look at your paycheck eventually, and that it helps you get by.
Yeah, yeah. And to that point, let's end it on the importance of financial desire, because I do want to, like, especially both of us being women, like, let's talk about the cultural things. Let's talk about, what about money, like the topic of money and how it's so intricately related to this career, because there's so much debate on it. Especially there's this social onus on women, really, to be like less money motivated or whatever have you. I'd love to hear your advice on this and just kind of like address these controversies.
So it's kind of funny. I've never, and I know that they're out there. I haven't so much experienced anything as a woman, negatively as a woman in recruiting in the companies that I've been in the industry out there. Yes. But as far as money or anything culturally in either of the companies I've been in, all the top producers were women. In my company right now, our top 3, we were all women. Women are, and I was actually curious to ask you at one point, how many biller top producers are you talking to that are men versus women? I feel like I've run into the majority of them are all women. So this is such a woman friendly career. And I think I'm also in a perfect place right now to talk about it, because I just got married. I am working. We're going to have a family at some point. And I know that I am in a career that will not go away when I want to come back. I can take a year off if I want to. I'm actually planning on, we don't know if I can actually do that and step away for a whole year. In my brain, I think I can now, because, everything's stressful, but no, the flexibility that the right company you will find, most companies don't want to let someone good go. And being a woman in this industry, you can pretty much take a ton of time off for that. You can raise a family, you can come back. My old firm, we brought someone back after 7 years, and it was like, didn't skip a beat. So I think for women, I think it's a great industry. And I was actually reading something, I'll have to share it with you, I'll have to find it again, but women are kind of built better, just mentally, and kind of like how we typically are, and the things that impact us and how we react and things like that. They've actually said that this is a career that's better for women than men. Pretty interesting.
I love everything about what you said, because I resonate with all of it. I totally agree. Most of the firms that we look at least on the producer level, heavy, like definitely, it's almost in the earlier stages of people's careers, women and men are right there, like 50-50, like kind of at the top biller level. That was also my personal experience, like from a producing standpoint. The only issue that I think plagues every single industry, that I think every single industry still needs to deal with, but probably to your point, less so on our side, I do see a lot of politics getting involved in terms of like owners being a lot of men, owners, upper level, C-level being a lot of males. That is typical in, I would say, every single industry. So I wouldn't even say that's relatively something to note for recruiting specifically. Because in a recruiting business, the biggest difference is that the women actually make a lot of money because it's production based. So potentially they're making more than like a manager who's a dude, right? So
and it's crazy to think about when you've got these women, and it's crazy to me that I have my boss, and you would probably understand that in a lot of companies, middle management, managing directors, managing partners, whatever we want to call them, but my boss has a group of 5 of us under her. And it is still crazy to me that she's out there billing, $850,000, $900,000 a year on a perm full desk while managing a group of 5 and has 3 kids at home, including a 3-year-old. And she unplugs, between 6 and 9, has dinner with her family, cooks dinner every day for her family. That's super important to her. It's always been important to her. Her husband is the most supportive guy on the planet as well. That's very helpful. But after 9, she puts her kids to bed, she does whatever, hops back on her laptop. Not required, but most of the top producers, or if you want to be top producer, you're going to have to realize this is never going to be a 9 to 5. I don't care how good you are. You're always working. And that's just if you want to make money. So it's, but again, women can still have families. They could still do things. They could still, I mean, you know, ask me if you can unplug fully from a vacation, whether you're man or female. And I'll probably say that probably no, you can't fully unplug most of the time, but no, I find this to be a very female friendly environment. And I came from the most male, one of the most male dominated industries, golf. So this is a little more friendly.
Yeah. And again, to the example that you brought up, I mean, she is clearly someone that has very high personal level of achievement. She could at any given time be like, you know what, I'm just going to plug off at 4 and I'm just going to do half. I'm going to do $500,000. But she's still making over $200,000-$300,000 a year. That's what's incredible about this career, right? Like you could say today, I want to make 200. Tomorrow, I want to make 500. You know, like it's totally up to you to control how many hours you really want to work, because this is a production-based job. So again, it's intricately linked to financial goals, financial drive, and the whole mentality of producing versus kind of being a worker somewhere, right? Like that's the biggest difference. It's like you're in control of your time and what you get out of it.
And I think it's important to know, or it's important for people to know the different opportunities that exist in recruiting, where I talk about a lot of flexibility. I talk about a lot of times I'm working these hours, this hour, but I'm not talking about the days that I just randomly take off because I just need a minute. Or, you know, over the last couple of months before my wedding, you know, a million things come up. I don't need to ask for a hall pass to go to the bathroom. I just go do what I need to do. It's a very flexible industry for the most part. Again, I'm in executive search, and I know staffing at the, you know, higher level of more transactional type, you know, staffing in general, a little more strict, a little more KPI metrics driven. I haven't been measured on a metric in I don't know how long, and I wouldn't go to a company that had metrics. I would never, the whole phone counting thing, not for me. And that's the beauty of when you kind of get to your place in recruiting. I would just say do enough so they can't fire you. Be so good they can't let you go. That's always been my motto, is that. And you'll get a lot of flexibility if you just do your job well, and you'll love it.
Yeah. And that again is a super good example of just like the perseverance that you obviously went through to get to where you are today, where this is all achievable. And that is something I do want the listeners and our audience to know about recruiting, is that maybe when you start out, it's going to be very KPI driven, very top down, very much like grind. And you, to your point, you've been making, you're making 50 grand and you're eating all the crap, and people are just like totally driving you nuts. And it's awful when you first start. But as long as you have that dream in your heart, that financial drive, as well as the vision of what this is and isn't, then you will know, hey, my suffering today is going to result in me being Jen, you know, when I'm 35 and I'm making over 300 a year, and I have flexibility, and I can take off time, and I can travel, and I get respected, and I get recognition, and I can build a wonderful life where I can just
in those metrics. I not bashing companies that use metrics. It's just at a certain level in a career, you're going to be metrics driven on your own. Your mind is going to be your metric, your measurement. And in my brain now, because of all the metrics and KPIs I was held to at my first, I worked for a staffing firm for several years, fairly well-known, large national one, before I went into executive search. And it was night and day, but I will tell you, just like my foundation at Avis built my mentality for sales and how to sell top down, you know, go for the biggest number first and then work your way down if you have to. That building that out the way that I did on KPIs, metrics, just having in my brain that a certain number of phone calls will eventually lead to a certain number of people answering, which you then can convert into candidates, then convert into submittals, which then convert into interviews, which will then hopefully result in that, you know, that final offer. But, you know, the new people wanting to come into the industry, just know that it could take 100 phone calls to get 10 candidates, to then get 3 submittals, to then maybe get 1 interview. So stock your numbers. I mean, the KPIs are there for a reason. They're measured and they're right. But eventually your business will turn into you calling and you smiling and dialing to your phone ringing off the hook and you're the one answering. That was my level of success, or my indication of success to me was when my phone started ringing more than I was dialing. That was always going to be my measure of success, because I got so jealous of other people in my office. I'm like, why the hell does their phone ring all the time? And I'm always just like desperate to get people to pick up. So
I love that. I think that's a very great takeaway. And for me, I'm going to keep that in mind. I love that whole idea. You're right. Like when that starts happening is when you do less work and really start making really big money, because your network is like, who do I call? Jen, right? It's like, and then money and business just kind of flows. And again, it's just, this is not a get rich quick scheme. This is a career. This is a business. Like you have to do your time. And if you're not ready for that, you're looking, so many people are like, oh, recruiters make 200 grand. How do I get it? How do I do it? And they're not looking at any of the crap that it took us to get there.
Yeah. Well, that's like, and my husband is a leadership member in a mortgage company, and mortgage officers or loan officers, people see loan officers, and especially over the last few years, they're like, those people make 400 grand. I'm like, they didn't tell you about the years where they made nothing. Like it's, I flow with a lot of these jobs, and over the last couple of years, the smart recruiters banked, and because we all realize that this is not going to be like this forever. There are downtimes in the industry. You know, ask a recruiter that recruited in 2009. Ask any of us who went through the first part of COVID, where all of us were wondering, are we done? Does anyone need us anymore? And then it came back 100%. Trifold, like unbelievable, and everyone needs you. So it's, you've got to be able to ride the wave, man. That's it.
Yeah, I love it. Any last tips of advice to our members, our audience?
Well, the one thing that I wanted to mention, and this is it, I promise, and you and I talked about this before, was, and I think this will be helpful not only for people coming in, but those of us that are in the industry and want to see our industry flourish. All of us recruiters, we're actually, a lot of us are all friends, different companies, different, I mean, I can't even tell you how many people at different firms I'm friends with, and we'll share candidates that we might not be able to help. But we want to protect this industry, and we want the right people here for the right reasons, because it reflects on all of us when a good or bad situation happens with recruiters. Because how many times do you call someone, they're like, oh, I don't work with recruiters because this one time X, Y, and Z happened. That would me be like, no, I don't want to date anybody. I dated this one guy and he pulled my hair in kindergarten and never again. Like, no, that's not going to fly.
Right.
But my biggest advice to anyone, and again, it's helpful for them and it's helpful for us, just be genuine, be genuine, learn how to be yourself, figure out who that is. I think it took me a little while to figure out that I could be myself. I could be this outgoing, gregarious, loud person that sometimes swears and, you know, has tattoos and a nose ring, and, you know, I'm who I am. And I'm not necessarily talking about, you know, dress how you want, but be yourself, be genuine on those phone calls. Don't be salesy, because people pick that up. And then once you feel better and more confident in your own skin in recruiting, and it'll come, I'm telling you, quicker when you're yourself, your LinkedIn messages are better. Your phone messages are better. Your conversations are better, because you're not super focused on being, you know, prim, proper, and, oh, let me ask this question and following a script and this and that. I'm telling you, my phone started ringing. My emails were getting answered just when I was just more genuine, and I was a little bit more myself in all of it. So that would, on top of everything, I really, truly believe that if you're your genuine self, whoever that is, people will see that and they'll want to do business with you, because they don't feel like you're a robot. And I truly believe that I'm not the best recruiter. I am by far, I'm learning every single day still, but I truly believe that I do the business I do because people like me and they know I'm going to tell them transparently what the real deal is. And that would be my one thing to make sure that people hold on to, is just don't think you have to be like somebody else that you hear on the floor. Just figure out who you are and then be that person.
Yeah. Have your own secret sauce, have your own brand, and just be yourself. Absolutely.
Yes.
I love that. What a great note. I think it's good life advice as well.
Be yourself. Life's too short to be anybody else. It's way more fun to be yourself.
Yeah. Especially when you like get to the age when you're having a career, and you got to start like formulating that next level of who you're going to be. So thank you so much, Jenn. Where can our listeners follow you or find you if they want to follow your journey and learn more from you?
You can follow me on LinkedIn. I actually just changed my name today, so I am no longer Jenn Belso on LinkedIn. You will never be able to pronounce my last name, but it is Zinschlag. So I went from JB to JZ, but you can still find me by Jenn Belso. And I try to put out some relevant content. Lately, it's been mostly jobs. But yeah, I'm always on LinkedIn and usually trying to keep it sarcastic and light, and throwing some sarcasm on your posts. So you can find me there.
I love it. Well, thank you so much for sharing your story with us. Super inspirational, just exactly what I need to hear. And I hope our audience can really take away a few nuggets of wisdom to implement in their lives and think about as they're continuing to explore recruitment.